the most dangerous person in the room isn't the loudest. It's the one who has nothing to prove. And somewhere deep inside you, you already know what that feels like. Not the version of you that performs, not the version that explains and justifies and shrinks. The version underneath all of that. Still certain, unmoved. That version isn't lost. It's just buried. And today, we're going to dig it out. Stay with me for the next 20 minutes, not because I'm going to give you a list of tricks, not because I have a formula that fixes everything overnight, but because what we're about to go through, slowly, carefully, honestly, has the potential to change something fundamental about how you carry yourself through the world. Most self-improvement content gives you surface-level advice. Speak with confidence. Hold eye contact. Stop caring what people think. As if you could just decide that. As if the brain worked like a light switch. It doesn't. And you know it doesn't because you've tried. You've told yourself to stop seeking approval and then checked your phone 30 seconds later, hoping someone responded. You've told yourself you don't care what they think and then replayed that conversation at 2 in the morning, rewording it, rerunning it, wondering what they meant. That's not weakness. That's neuroscience. And once you understand what's actually happening inside your mind, not as a metaphor, but as a biological reality, everything starts to make more sense. So let's start there. Let's start with the truth about why you care so much and why that's not your fault. Here is something most people never get told. Your need for social approval is not a personality flaw. It is not immaturity. It is not something that more successful people have somehow outgrown. It is a survival mechanism, ancient, powerful, and wildly out of date. For hundreds of thousands of years, human beings lived in small tribes. Belonging to that tribe was not a social preference. It was the difference between life and death. Being rejected by the group meant no shelter, no food, no protection. Your brain learned very early in human history to treat social rejection the same way it treated physical danger. The same alarm system, the same stress hormones, the same desperate urgency to fix it. Neuroscientists at UCLA confirmed this in a landmark study. They placed participants in a brain scanner and had them experience social rejection, simply being excluded from an online game. The regions of the brain that lit up were the same regions that activate during physical pain, not metaphorical pain. Actual pain. The anterior cingulate cortex, your brain's pain processing center, responds to being left out the way it responds to a broken bone. So when you feel that tightening in your chest after someone dismisses you, when you feel that anxious pull to explain yourself, to justify your choices, to smooth over the tension, your ancient brain is not being irrational. It genuinely believes your survival is at stake. The problem is, it's wrong. You are not in a tribe where rejection means death. You are in a modern world where someone disagreeing with your life choices is simply an opinion, a signal with no real power unless you give it power. But your nervous system doesn't know that yet. And this is exactly where Stoic philosophy begins. Marcus Aurelius, who governed one of the most complex empires in human history, who faced real threats, real betrayals, real loss, wrote this in his private journal. I have often wondered how it is that every man loves himself more than all the rest of men, but yet sets less value on his own opinion of himself than on the opinion of others. He wasn't writing that for an audience. He was writing it to himself. Because even at the height of his power, surrounded by the greatest minds of his age, he still had to remind himself daily not to outsource his worth. If Marcus Aurelius needed that reminder, you are allowed to need it too. The first step in rewiring this pattern is not willpower, it is understanding. When you know that your craving for approval is a misfiring survival instinct, not a reflection of reality, you can begin to create distance between the feeling and the behavior. You can feel the pull without following it. You can notice the alarm without believing the emergency is real. Psychologists call this cognitive diffusion, the ability to observe your thoughts without being consumed by them. To say, I notice I'm feeling anxious about their opinion, rather than, their opinion determines my worth. That single shift in language changes your entire relationship with the experience. The Stoics called it prosoche, self-attention, the practice of watching your own mind with the same calm curiosity you might watch clouds moving across a sky, not judging, not fighting, just seeing clearly. And seeing clearly is where everything begins. We are a species of people exhausted from watching each other watch each other. Seneca, who advised emperors, survived exile, and faced death with remarkable steadiness, wrote this: "It is not that I am brave, it is that I know what is worth fearing." Most of what we fear socially, judgment, disapproval, being misunderstood, does not qualify. The Stoics were not emotionless. They did not pretend indifference was the same as strength. Seneca wept. Marcus grieved. Epictetus knew pain at a level most of us will never approach. But they developed a rigorous, practical discipline of asking one question before allowing any external force to affect their internal state. Does this actually have power over me, or am I granting it power? That question is not rhetorical. It is a daily practice, a mental habit built over time through repetition, reflection, and radical honesty with yourself. And modern psychology supports this completely. Research into locus of control, a concept developed by psychologist Julian Rotter, shows that people who believe their outcomes are primarily determined by internal factors. Their choices, their responses, their character consistently report higher levels of psychological well-being, resilience, and life satisfaction than those who attribute their outcomes to external forces. The belief that you are the primary author of your experience is not naive optimism. It is a measurable psychological advantage. The shift from external to internal locus of control is not a personality trait you're either born with or not. It is a skill, a muscle. And like any muscle, it grows through specific, intentional exercise. We are going to talk about exactly what that exercise looks like. But first, I want you to understand one more thing about why this is so hard. You are living in the most psychologically sophisticated manipulation environment ever constructed by human beings. That is not an exaggeration. Every major platform you interact with daily, every feed, every notification, every red badge on an app icon, has been engineered by teams of behavioral scientists using decades of psychological research to do one single thing: capture and hold your attention. And the primary lever they pull is social comparison and social validation. Your brain releases dopamine, the neurotransmitter associated with reward and anticipation, when you receive social approval, a like, a positive comment, a message notification. The platforms know this. They have measured it, optimized for it, and built entire systems designed to create a cycle of craving and reward that keeps you returning, scrolling, checking. But here's what the research shows, and this is critical. Dopamine is not a happiness chemical. It is an anticipation chemical. It drives you toward reward, but it does not deliver satisfaction. The moment you receive the like, the hit fades. The moment you get the validation, the hunger returns. You are not meant to feel satisfied. You are meant to keep wanting. We need to talk about confidence because most people have it completely backwards. They think confidence is the feeling you have when everything is going well, when you look good, when people are responding positively, when your work is being recognized. They think it's something that comes from success, from external validation, from a track record of wins. Real confidence, the kind the Stoics embodied, the kind that holds steady under pressure, is not a feeling. It is a posture, a settled relationship with yourself that does not require external confirmation. Psychologists call this self-efficacy, a concept developed by Albert Bandura. It is the belief in your own capacity to act effectively in the world, not based on guaranteed outcomes, but based on your trust in your own process. People with high self-efficacy don't need certainty. They don't need guarantees. They don't need everyone around them to affirm their choices. They operate from the inside out. And this kind of confidence is built through one thing above all others: keeping promises to yourself. Every time you say you're going to do something, and then you do it, not for anyone else, not for an audience, but because you told yourself you would, you deposit something into your internal account, a small but real proof of your own reliability. And over time, those deposits compound. You begin to trust yourself in the way that you might trust a person who has never let you down. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. Not performing one, not convincing others you are one, being one in the quiet, unseen moments when no one is watching and the only witness is yourself." That is where real confidence is built, in the gap between the version of yourself you present to others and the version you are when no one is watching. When you close that gap, when who you are in public and who you are in private become the same person, the need for external validation begins to dissolve. Because you already know the answer to the question approval was trying to answer. You are enough. Not because you've achieved enough, not because enough people have confirmed it, but because you have shown up consistently for yourself, and that is evidence no one can take away. We've covered the biology, we've named the exhaustion, we've exposed the system designed to exploit it, and we've begun to redefine what genuine confidence actually means. But understanding is only the first half. In the next 10 minutes, we're going to get practical. We're going to talk about exactly how to rebuild your relationship with yourself, step by step, with tools drawn from both Stoic philosophy and modern behavioral science. We're going to talk about boundaries, not as aggression, but as clarity. We're going to talk about silence as a form of power. We're going to talk about the daily practices that, done consistently, will begin to shift your center of gravity from the outside world to the inside. Stay with me. In the first half of this video, we established something important. Your need for approval is not a character flaw. It is a misfiring survival instinct, exploited by a digital environment engineered specifically to keep you hooked on external validation. And the path out of that loop is not willpower. It is understanding, followed by deliberate, consistent practice. Now we go deeper, because here's what most people discover when they start doing this inner work. The hardest part is not identifying the problem. The hardest part is tolerating the discomfort of changing. When you stop over-explaining your choices, people notice. When you hold a boundary that you previously never held, relationships shift. When you stop performing and start being, some people in your life will not know what to do with the new version of you, and they will push back. That discomfort is not a sign that you're doing something wrong. It is a sign that something real is happening. Let's begin with something simple but profoundly misunderstood. Silence. Most people are terrified of silence. In conversations, they rush to fill it. When accused or questioned, they immediately defend. When uncertain, they talk more rather than less, as if volume could substitute for clarity. But consider what silence actually communicates when it comes from a settled person. It communicates that you are not rattled, that you are not scrambling, that you have nothing to prove, that you are comfortable enough in your own skin to let a moment breathe without anxiously trying to control it. Here is your first practical tool. The next time you feel the urge to immediately defend yourself, to explain, to justify, to fill the silence, pause. Count 3 full seconds internally. Breathe. And then ask yourself, is a response necessary here? And if so, what response serves my actual values? Not my ego, not my fear, but my values. That 3-second window is where your life changes. Slowly, reliably, permanently. Now let's talk about something that is widely discussed and deeply misunderstood. Boundaries. Most people think of boundaries as walls, aggressive, defensive structures you build to keep people out. Or they think of boundaries as ultimatums, dramatic declarations that fundamentally alter relationships. The Stoics would have recognized boundaries as something far simpler and far more powerful. Clarity about what is consistent with your values and what is not. A boundary is not a punishment. It is not an act of anger. It is a statement of self-knowledge. It says, I understand what I can engage with in a way that maintains my integrity, and I understand what I cannot. That's it. Here is why this matters psychologically. Research in self-determination theory shows that autonomy, the sense that your actions are genuinely chosen rather than coerced, is one of the 3 fundamental pillars of human psychological well-being. When you consistently fail to set boundaries, you are systematically undermining your own autonomy. You are training yourself through repeated action that your needs are less important than other people's comfort, that your values are negotiable, that you are available for whatever others require, regardless of the cost to yourself. And your nervous system notices. It registers every instance of self-abandonment, not as a discrete event, but as a pattern. A pattern that accumulates over time into a chronic, low-grade anxiety. A background sense that you are not safe in your own life, not protected by your own standards, not valued even by yourself. Setting a boundary reverses this, not dramatically, not all at once, but each boundary held is a vote for the version of yourself that deserves protection. Epictetus said, He is a wise man who does not grieve for the things which he has not, but rejoices for those which he has. And what you have, what no one can take unless you surrender it, is your judgment, your capacity to decide what is acceptable in your own life. Here is what setting a boundary actually looks like in Stoic practice. It is not a long speech. It is not an emotional confrontation. It is a quiet, firm, consistent statement of fact. Not, I can't believe you would do that to me. That is a performance of injury. It invites negotiation and drama. Instead, that doesn't work for me, or I'm not available for that. Or simply, no, Short, calm, clear, no apology, no elaboration, no lengthy justification that implicitly signals you believe you need their approval to have a standard. Because here is the truth. When you over-explain a boundary, you are suggesting that it requires validation, that it is a position you are defending, rather than a fact you are stating. And that is the posture of someone seeking permission to respect themselves. You do not need permission. The Stoic posture is different. It says, "This is who I am. This is how I operate. You are welcome to agree or disagree. Neither changes the fact." That is not arrogance. That is dignity. And when you practice it consistently, not perfectly, but consistently, something shifts in how you move through the world. You begin to attract people who respect clarity. You begin to naturally create distance from people who only felt comfortable with you when you had no standards. And you begin to feel, perhaps for the first time in a long time, genuinely safe in your own life. Understanding is not transformation. Information is not change. Let me give you a daily practice drawn from both Stoic tradition and contemporary behavioral science that you can begin today, not someday. Today, before you touch your phone, before the world tells you what to think about and fear and want, sit, breathe, and ask yourself 3 questions. 1. What is within my control today? Name it specifically. Your attention, your effort, how you respond to what comes. Not outcomes, process. 2. What is likely to challenge me today? Not to catastrophize, but to prepare. The Stoics called this premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of adversity. Research in mental contrasting, developed by psychologist Gabriele Oettingen, confirms that people who anticipate obstacles before pursuing a goal are significantly more likely to follow through than those who only visualize success. The Stoics were right. Preparation is not pessimism. It is wisdom. 3. What kind of person do I want to be today? Not what do I want to achieve. Who do I want to be? Patient, clear, grounded, present. Name it. Hold it. Let it guide the day. Throughout the day, the pause. This is the practice we discussed earlier. The 3-second gap between stimulus and response. Use it liberally. Every time you feel reactive, every time the urge to defend, explain, perform, or collapse arises, pause, breathe, choose. You will not do this perfectly. That is not the goal. The goal is to do it more often than yesterday. Each successful pause is a deposit in your internal account. The Stoics called this the evening examination. Seneca wrote about it explicitly. Before sleep, review the day, not with self-criticism, but with honest curiosity. Ask, where did I act in alignment with my values? Acknowledge it, not with pride that inflates the ego, but with quiet recognition. You did that. That was yours. Ask, where did I fall short? Not to punish, to learn. What was the trigger? What did the old pattern look like? What could a wiser response have been? File it, not as evidence of failure, but as data for tomorrow. And finally, what did today teach me about who I am becoming? Because you are always becoming. The only question is whether you are becoming deliberately or by default. This practice, 5 minutes in the morning, the pause throughout the day, 5 minutes in the evening, makes the becoming deliberate. There is a quality that emerges in people who have done genuine inner work, who have stopped performing and started simply being. That is immediately recognizable even when it defies easy description. It is not loudness, It is not aggression. It is not the forced confidence of someone who has memorized a list of power poses. It is stillness. Wait. Presence. The Stoic ideal is not a person who feels nothing. It is a person whose inner world is stable enough that external turbulence does not define their response. When you carry yourself that way, when people around you sense that you are not anxious for their approval, not threatened by their disagreement, not desperate for their validation, the nature of your relationships changes. I want to close by talking about something the self-improvement industry almost never addresses. This is slow. Real change, not the kind that looks good on a highlight reel, but the kind that holds when life gets genuinely hard, is slow. It is built in the unsexy, unwitnessed accumulation of small choices made consistently over a long period of time. There will be days when you forget everything in this video. Days when the old patterns return with full force. Days when you seek approval desperately, when you over-explain compulsively, when you collapse into reactivity rather than choosing response. Days when the inner critic wins and the performance resumes, and you feel no different from the person you were before you started. That is not failure. That is the actual process. The Stoics did not promise transformation. They promised something better, a direction, a daily orientation toward wisdom, toward self-governance, toward the kind of internal freedom that circumstances cannot remove. They were not claiming to have arrived. Marcus Aurelius was writing his meditations in the last years of his reign, still reminding himself of the same principles he'd been practicing for decades. Because the work is never finished. And that is not a tragedy. It is the nature of a life lived deliberately. Every morning you wake up and choose your response rather than defaulting to reaction. You are stronger than you were. Every time you hold a boundary from a place of clarity rather than collapsing from a place of fear, you are more yourself than you were. Every time you sit in silence when performance would have been easier, you are freer than you were. That is the compound interest of this work. Invisible in the short term, undeniable over time. The Stoics did not pursue greatness. They pursued something quieter and more durable. They pursued a self that could not be shaken, not by opinion, not by failure, not by the relentless noise of a world that profits from your insecurity. That is what you are building, one morning at a time, one pause at a time, one honest conversation with yourself at a time. You will not always get it right, but you will get it more right than before. And more right than before is everything. Save this video. Come back to it when you forget, and you will forget, and that's okay. Come back. Begin again. That is not weakness. That is the practice. And share it with someone who is tired of performing. Someone who has forgotten that they are allowed to simply be. The quieter your need for approval, the louder your presence becomes. The less you perform, the more you are. And the more you are, truly, consistently, quietly, the more the world makes room for you.